month's episode of Impact at Work. For this month, I have a very special guest. His name is Ajit Nawalka, and you might have heard of him if you are a coach or a thought leader in your industry, as he is the leader of Mindvalley's division called EverCoach. Now, what you might not know is at one time, Ajit was actually part of the core team at Mindvalley. And I want to share an interesting story where when I first joined about 5 years ago, I found myself having issues with dealing with a lot of competing priorities. If you've seen what Mindvalley does, we innovate a lot, and there's a lot of different projects that we have to work on, and I had a slight sense of overwhelm. And what was magical is Ajit actually came into my life and actually mentored me, because he's someone that understands the principles of productivity, and he's an amazing coach and leader for other employees within the company. And when he sensed that I was feeling this sense of overwhelm, he came to me and he gave me these specific methods that allowed me to organize my work and think about it in a very different way. Now, you're all going to get a benefit of this through this episode, where he's going to come in and lead us through some systems and models about productivity and about how to redefine what you look like, what you look at for your work, whether it's from your own productivity as an employee or as somebody who's managing a team or as someone who's an entrepreneur. You're going to get a ton of value from this. Now, before I introduce Ajit, I want to say a few things about him. Number one, he's already written a book called The Book of Coaching. So anybody who's a coach, an author, a speaker is able to get this book and get a ton of insights. And now Ajit's working on his second book called Live Big, which we're going to get insights from this episode even before this book's release. And so you are going to get the exclusive insights on these tools, and we're going to spend some time together to learn how to challenge these rules around productivity at the workplace and look at these new models that'll make you look at it in a very different way and be so much more productive with a lot less stress and be able to increase your impact regardless of what you do. So with that, let's get started with Ajit Nawalka. So hi Ajit, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. It's fun and exciting to be here.
So what I love is the fact that we've known each other now for almost 5 years.
Yeah.
And what I shared in the introduction is the fact that when I first started, I had some issues with my own prioritization. I came from a place where I didn't necessarily know how to work on multiple projects like we do here at Mindvalley. And you came and you gave me so many insights at the beginning, and I'm eternally grateful for that. I wanted to talk and first introduce with the fact of what are some of the things people can expect from this training?
So thank you for that, first of all. And secondly, what I've found in the past almost over a decade at this point of being either an entrepreneur or working in a company like Mindvalley, which is fast-paced and there's a lot of innovation happening a lot of times, is that there's a lot of theories that are out there in the world about productivity or being a high performer and so forth, and a lot of them are kind of flawed theories, and they're perpetuating beliefs, people talking about the same thing without actually experimenting and seeing what really works again and again and again. And so what I found myself doing, and this was something that was happening at that time a lot, especially because I was at that stage of my career where I was running Mindvalley, or I was very involved in Mindvalley at different years. And at the same point in time, I had my businesses as side businesses that I was running. We call them side hustles these days, right? So I had at least one, and sometimes 2 to 3 side hustles that I would have started either in partnership with Mindvalley or just as a company that I wanted to experiment with. And that basically meant that any given time, I had a list that would never end, right? The items that I could, like nobody humanly could possibly achieve, and that forced me to think and reimagine what leadership really looks like, what being a great professional really looks like, or a high performer really looks like, or being an entrepreneur that doesn't have to slog his way to become successful looks like. And that kind of got me to innovate and create a lot of these strategies that we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about some of the common beliefs that are out there that you might have heard from anywhere, and sometimes you do believe that to be true. And then what we're going to share is what actually happens behind the curtain for high performers and entrepreneurs that you may believe what is the perpetuating belief that is out there versus what they actually do, because I've had the good fortune of working with a lot of these guys.
That's perfect. And I'd love to even frame it in a way to ask, who are the types of people watching this training that are going to get the most out of these lessons?
pretty much everybody, especially if you're a professional, if you're working in an environment which needs you to be productive, or any entrepreneur. If you are an author, speaker, coach, if you're a trainer, if you're a CEO, a CMO, a COO, any of the titles, or any of these roles that you play in as a professional or as an entrepreneur. Honestly, you could even use it irrespective if you're not even a professional. I mean, this is impact at work, so it is for professionals very specifically, but even if you want to take these ideas and bring it to your personal life, it's equally applicable. It doesn't only have to limit itself to work.
That's amazing. And I've seen you play a role. I mean, I've seen you as a CMO. I've seen you as a CEO. I've seen you as an entrepreneur. I've seen you as a coach. I've seen you as a speaker. And so you get to speak to a lot of different people here. And I'm curious, now you're putting your second book out there. I know the first one was on coaching. Now you've been inspired to do the Live Big book. And I'd love to hear what inspired you to put these contents together.
So the book of coaching, context-wise, was more written because the industry of coaching has a problem. And the problem is that a lot of theories that are presented in that market is around what works for me. And whoever's talking is the me in that scenario. When somebody does that in an industry, what happens, it does a lot of disservice to the people who are coming into the industry or are new to the format or doesn't really fully understand how to create a unique business and a business that will thrive for a long time. So we said, can we put together a research document? Can we actually find principles that people can utilize that will create their own structures, their own unique methodology, their own unique business structures, their own true reality, instead of saying, who can I copy today, right? So that is where the book of coaching came in. At all points, so the one thing that I've really found for myself is one of my greatest passions. It has always been, even when I was a teenager, I used to write poems, and I had lost that art at some point, and I realized that one of my biggest passions, the things that really lights me up, that I don't like to do all the time, but I like to do it a lot of the times, is writing. And so I made a personal mission to write books because that I find is a great way to express what you've learned and help other people, but in the process also just feel really fulfilled. So it's also a personal thing for me to write books, and that kind of drove me to write Live Big because I was finding, again, so many entrepreneurs I meet, and it's very directed towards entrepreneurs, Live Big in particular, I meet and they're just like really stressed out. They become, and sorry for using the word, but they become assholes in a way sometimes. They would come out in the world as if the world owes them something, or they would come out in the world as if they're demanding something from the world. They would not treat their employees well, they won't treat their colleagues well, they have terrible personal lives, and for some reason they feel like that's okay. And that's okay for them, but that's also how we lose a lot of entrepreneurs at a really early age, or they become demotivated or have terrible personal lives, are horrible parents, and so forth. And I said, there has to be a better way to look at it. And a transformation had happened in my life about 3 years ago. My current wife and then coach kind of propelled me towards that transformation to really look within and ask myself certain questions, which was, why am I being the way I am being, and why do I not really love myself, and what are those things that really can be done to shift that mindset? And that propelled me in really writing the book of bringing together ideas that go beyond how to work harder every single day. It's more about saying, hey, how can you live a big life instead of just having to constrain yourself to 18 hours of work every day? How do you live big? How do you really get to enjoy all aspects of life while building a great business? So it's kind of on that dimension.
Amazing. And you are all in for a treat, because what you're going to notice is we're going to get amazing concepts, theories, and systems that you're going to see the applicability of this is almost instantaneous. You'll be able to learn these new models and take the systems and immediately see how you can make some shifts in the way that you operate your business, in the way that you're in the workplace, which is what I'm really excited about for people to take away from this training. And so with that, are we ready for our rules that we're going to challenge? So we're going to have 4 rules we're going to talk about here, and we're going to introduce some new models of reality. So the first one, the rule, and we've already touched a bit on this, but let me frame it this way. If I want to be a successful person, I need to hustle, work hard all the time, and I need to outwork everyone else, or else I won't be doing enough. What do you tell people who have this belief?
So So what happens is that belief comes from a lot of stories that people tell you, right? Well, I worked hard to get this, I worked hard to do this, I worked hard to do that, right? And then today, in today's world, in the social media world, what happens is you see a 3-minute clip of some entrepreneur that you really admire, and it seems like, damn, they're working so hard, they're so great at this, they're so great at that. And what happens is we tend to think that 3 minutes of a clip of their life is 24 hours of their life. Right, or 18 hours of their life, or whatever that is, we start to believe that that's their life, basically, right? And that belief of making somebody's 3 minutes your 24 hours creates a perpetual cycle of fear, anxiety, and theoretically hard work, of you just working extra hours and thinking that's how you get ahead. If you look at any entrepreneur, now there is times when you have to work hard, but that doesn't mean that's the way you live your life, right? So there are stages. Let's say if you're just starting a business, right? Then because you're doing job of 5 people is why you work hard, right? But if you've started a business that has gone some traction, or you're in a work environment, you're a professional, you don't have to work 18 hours every day. That's just not the truth. And the reason why we start to believe it is because that's what's been told to us, right? That's what our bosses, let's say in the job, would say, you should work harder, right? But that's mostly because he's the boss and he doesn't want to work hard, right? And that's fine. It's actually, in a way, it sounds really bad, and this is bad leadership, and the boss is saying that you should work hard, but if the boss is actually not working that hard, that's actually good productivity management on his behalf or her behalf, right? So that's kind of like the understanding that we need to build, right? What somebody's saying versus what's the truth, right? There's 2 different realities that one needs to operate from, right? So what somebody's saying is what we think we need to do. What's the truth behind the curtain is something very different. You see, most businesses or entrepreneurs become successful not because the entrepreneur is working in the business, but because the entrepreneur is working on the business. Which basically, the difference between both those principles is basically, are you doing the work, or are you looking at the business and saying, hey, what is it that needs to happen, right? So a good leader, a good entrepreneur would always go, what is it that needs to happen for this business to transform, go to the next stage, right? A bad entrepreneur, or an entrepreneur which is not going to live or be able to ever meet the potential of the business, is what can I do next, right? So an entrepreneur that is ineffective always has a checklist. An entrepreneur who is more effective always has ideas of what needs to be executed next, or what needs to be manifested next, right? Now, how do we go about doing that, right? So one of the key principles that I teach in Live Big and generally as well is what I call the 4x4 principle, right? And 4x4 principle in summary simply means that you work 4 hours a day and 4 days a week. That's it. So that's 24 hours is all you need to work in a week, right? Now, before I go and explain how to make 4x4 reality in your life, let's understand why 4x4 works, right? So there are 2 principles that primarily help me create the 4x4, right? The first principle is called the Parkinson's Law. The Parkinson's Law states that the work will take all the space that you assign to it, all the time that you assign to it, right? Which simply means that if you give a task 8 hours to do, you will do it in 8 hours. If you give that task 2 hours, you'll most likely get it done in 2 hours. If you give it 4, it'll get it done in 4, right? So 4x4 is designed to actually use the Parkinson's Law to say, hey, okay, so if you only have 4 hours to execute the task, what are you gonna do, right? And so you force yourself to actually execute it within those time, right? So what happens, so think about it like this, it will go something like this here in your mental, in your mind as you think about 4x4 in your life, right? You'll go, oh, okay, so I have to do this task, let's say you have 10 tasks that you do every week, right? And you go, okay, so I have to do these 10 tasks. Let's look at the 10 tasks because I only have 4 hours and 4 days a week, right? So you're kind of forcing the work to fit into that time, right? Okay, it's 10 tasks. Are they all important, right? Which will get you to eliminate maybe 3 of those 10 tasks, right? So there's 7 tasks that you are left with. Right? Out of the 7 tasks, you'll go, okay, I need to fit 7 tasks in 4 hours in 4 days, which means I can only assign max up to say 2 hours to a task approximately, right? So you go, okay, so it's about 2 hours to a task, which means every task needs to be get done within the 2 hours. So what will happen essentially, and this comes also in the code, and I might misquote the person that actually said the code, is if somebody gives me 4 hours to chop a tree, 3 hours I'll spend sharpening my axe or something like that. I don't know who said the code.
I think I've heard it was Abraham Lincoln.
It might be Abraham Lincoln. Yeah, I don't want to misquote.
On the internet now, I have to like double check, so I don't take me on that. But I think I've heard.
I said that. I said that today. It is absolutely true because it's on the internet now. But anyway, so that code basically that's what ends up happening. So now you have 2 hours for a task. You go, okay, 1 hour I'll spend figuring out how to do this most effectively, and the next hour I'll get it done. Right? So that's usually how our tasks look like now. So, and so what 4x4 will do using the Parkinson's law is it will squeeze the work within that time. But there's another rule that is at work. It's called deep work. It's why this is a wonderful book by Cal Newport. It's called Deep Work, and absolutely check it out if you haven't checked it out yet. One of the most phenomenal books on really understanding how to get great quality work done. Is that book, right? So deep work basically talks about 2 types of timing, right? One is called deep work time, and the second is called fractured time. A fractured time is how we tend to live our lives now. I'm doing something, my phone's like facing up and my computer has all the notifications going off, and I'm focused on, say, writing something, and all of a sudden a message pops on Facebook and it gives me a notification, and I go right to Facebook and I go look at what's happening there, right? Or Twitter or Snapchat or whatever that is for you, or or somebody texts you or calls you or whatever that is, right? This is fractured time, which basically means that as you're starting to be productive, you just broke your flow, right? So then you flatten, and then it's not that you just immediately become productive again. That just doesn't happen. You need the ramp up time almost in a way, and so what happens is now you're moving a little bit, and then again you break the flow. Again, you break the flow. So what happens is you are actually always breaking the flow, never completing the task, right? In deep work, what happens is once you have done the takeoff time or the setup time of actually getting into the flow, you're just staying in the flow, right? Which means, let's say I assign 2 hours to a task based on the 4x4 principle that we just talked about, is what happens is you go, okay, now I have 2 hours to execute this task, but there's nothing else that distracts me. There's nothing else that can come in, like there's no phone, there's no notification, there's nothing else. It's assigned, and I'm going to get this done, right? Because you know that's the only time you have, so you cannot afford to have fractured time. So you're focusing too much on, really heavily on deep work. Now deep work, if you can do, and that's for the depth of the principle, which is why I invite you to read the book, is if you actually have work that is very intellectual, it might be that you, instead of doing 4x4, you might do 8x2. Because when it's very, very intellectual work, you need a longer deep work time, right? So I just want to give that as a side note, because some of the professionals might have very intellectual work. Sometimes entrepreneurs have really intellectual work. Like, for example, if you're an author, you might do 2 weeks away with just deep work, right? Because you're writing a book, right? Or a week, whatever that is for you, right? But it's faster to write a book that way than to write it in the night when you are, or in the morning every day, unless you are just purely an author, and then that's your 4x4 in a way, right? So that's a different thing. But if you're, as an entrepreneur, you're writing a book, it's easier for you to get away and write it for 7 days straight and just be in a deep work mode versus trying to write it every day for 2 hours.
Got it. And so, because one of the things that came to mind when you first mentioned, okay, you got to compress this work into a short amount of time, the first thought I had was like, oh, would that bring down the quality of the work? But what you're saying is that with deep work, it's not the case?
No, it actually increases the quality of your work. And that's why 4x4 is so critical, is yes, it compresses the time, but it also gives you focus time. So 4x4 is a non-negotiable though. So it's not like something you go, oh, 4x4 means I also check my Facebook in that time. No, that's not, unless that you are a social media manager. And that I understand that. But otherwise, no, you don't go to your Facebook or your Instagram or anything like that at that time. What you're focused on is getting that task done. And you will see, and again, I can't speak for every type of profession, because let's say, for example, a doctor can't do 4x4. It's impossible because they have clinic times and they have to be present at the clinic time. And that's just there's just no way out of that, right? But if you are in the modern style working environment, most of us are intellectual workers now. We are not factory workers anymore. We are not doing grunt jobs anymore. We are mostly intellectual workers. And because we're intellectual workers, it's more about how you show up and what you're doing in your hours versus the number of hours that you do, right? And that's why deep work is so important, is because the higher the quality of work you deliver, the lesser amount of time actually you need to actually work. Now 4x4 does one interesting thing, and I'm saying this as a side note because I shared the strategy with the client, and now they were like, okay, so I've done 4x4, I get all my tasks done, and then now I'm just trying more things. I'm doing more things every day. And I'm like, no, that's not the point of 4x4, because the premise was most entrepreneurs work in the business instead of working on the business, right? If you do 4x4 and now you have more time and you just do more work in the business, you're beating the purpose of 4x4. Right? So what you need to understand, the purpose of 4x4 is the understanding of how learning happens. Learning doesn't just happen by you saying, I'll read a book and that's it. You need to give your brain the time to process that knowledge that you acquired or this training that you watched. You just watch it and you go home and you do 4x4. It's not going to be as effective as you give yourself the time to actually let that knowledge simmer in and become a reality for yourself. So you give yourself that time. So once you've done the 4x4, you will see 90% of your tasks would get done in that time. And tasks that will remain are reactive tasks, not proactive tasks. They're not really important. It's like email. Email is not really important, but everybody thinks that's the most important thing that they have to do. That's actually the least important thing that you do, because you're working on somebody else's schedule when you are responding to an email. Right? Somebody else's need is what you're fulfilling. You're not doing the most important task of yours unless that's your job, like your customer service. So you have to respond to emails. But otherwise, it's not the most important task that you have to do. And so what you want to do is you create space for your reactive work, and then you create a lot more space of saying, how do I live big in the extra space that I have? How do I let learning come in? How do I bring conversations in the remaining time that you have? How do I create networks? How do I talk to more people? How do I learn better? What do I focus my time and energy on in context of family and friends and relationships and so forth? Because that learning that you get from there, that community that you build there, is so much more powerful in growing your business, your professional life, than any amount of work that you can do in the business.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because some of the people that are watching are in a workplace where they need to kind of like punch in and punch out. So like the 9 to 5 is still a big reality for them. So if they start working in this way that they get so much done in a shorter amount of time, isn't there going to be some sort of expectation for them to start adding more tasks? Like how do they get out of that almost enslavement to the 9 to 5?
So here is a little hack, and this is applicable to anybody who's in that type of role. There's two things. Firstly, get out of it. And secondly is, if you can't and you have to be in that environment, is think about how somebody becomes a high-performing professional. Right? A high-performing professional or a leader in an organization is not, as much as it reflects and is shown as if they're the hardest workers, they're not really. And you will know that by, if you look around and see who are the leaders in the organization. Usually the leaders in the organization are the people who build strong communities or strong bonds with other people, or they're people who are able to move a tribe. Right? That's leadership, basically, is what really gets them get ahead in their realities. And so what I will invite you to do is to do the 4x4, and then don't tell anybody that you do 4x4. Right? Use the rest of the time to learn. Use the rest of the time to grow yourself as an individual. Use the rest of the time to connect. Use the rest of the time to actually fill white spaces in the company. One of the most valuable employees that any company ever has is people who can find white spaces and suggest ideas to either solve it or solve it for the company. And if you can do any of that, you win still, right? So you still use 4x4 to be hyper productive, but don't go to your boss and say, I got everything done. Because then what they're going to do is the same thing. Hey, here's more for you, because here's how the boss would think. He'll think, oh, maybe I have assigned too little to the person. They don't think you're more productive. They're thinking more, oh, I think maybe I've assigned too little to this person. Maybe I need to just assign more tasks. So they, instead of recognizing that you're hyper productive and so you can get all these other things done, they would think that you just like have less work, right? So they'll just assign you more things. So just be careful with that. Do the 4x4. Let that extra space and time, like an entrepreneur will use for learning, you use it for learning and growth and connecting with other people and building a tribe around you and becoming a better leader and a better performer at what you do, but through study and learning and growth.
Amazing. So I want to recap this triad because I think it's very powerful. So the first thing we did is we talked about you need to hustle all the time. You need to work, and that's the way that you get ahead, and you need to do better and more work than anyone else to stay ahead. And that's not the case. With a 4x4 mindset here, we talk about working only 4 hours for 4 days where you're into a deep work mode. We're acknowledging Pareto's law, which says every task will expand based on it.
Parkinson's law.
Parkinson's law.
Yeah,
Pareto's the
Pareto's
90-20.
80-20, yeah. Is it?
Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law is that any task will expand to take up the time you have given it permission to expand to. If you compress that time, you'll see that you can still get the same amount of tasks done, and it forces you to prioritize. And then finally, we also acknowledge deep work, which is going to be the fact that once you get into a focused state, which means you eliminate all distractions. One of the biggest things I've done based on that concept as well is turn off all notifications on my phone.
Yeah, that's a great.
And nothing went wrong. Nothing went wrong. And so I highly suggest that for people who are going into that deep work mindset. And you've learned a lot of these strategies, these systems that you can actually get into that and what to do with this extra time. Learn, connect, grow yourself, train your leadership skills, and that will allow you to be much more productive and to grow within whatever role that you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I told you this was going to be applicable. Let's go into round 2. Now this one has a bit more of an external focus, and I really like this because we talk about how people looked at those 3-minute clips of other highly successful entrepreneurs, and then they got the impression that they needed to hustle all the time. Another thing is that for people that are looking for innovative ideas or ways to grow their business or to be more productive in their role, they'll look at competition as a way of being inspired on what to do or how to do anything. And you say that just looking at and copying your competition is not the best way.
Yeah. So what happens when we look at competition often is that we go, okay, that's my competition and I should just copy because it's working for them, right? And even in professions, like when you're a professional, you go, oh, that person seems to get all the attention and everything, let me just copy whatever that person's doing. There's a difference between copy and learning, right? And there's a difference, a huge difference between a copy of something and original thought or original idea, right? Now, to learn from somebody that's ahead of the game is a really, really good idea. To copy somebody it's like, think about it like this. Think about the favorite actor that you have, right? Whoever that is, who's your favorite actor?
I'll go with Iron Man.
Iron Man, so Robert Downey Jr., right? Robert Downey Jr., phenomenal actor, I love him too. So Robert Downey Jr. is your favorite actor. Would you like to see a copy of Robert Downey Jr. as the second best actor in your list?
Of course not.
Of course not, right? And that's what happens with a copy, right? As a business, if you copy another business, all you become is a second best in that business, but in that micro category where only one business can fit, because that's the original idea, right? A copy doesn't make you succeed in a business. It has to have its unique idea, unique purpose. Now, but what you do want to do is you want to learn from the best. You want to learn from people who have gotten ahead and go, okay, what is it that they are doing that is working for them? So I can also see what is it that I can take from it. For example, if let's say there's a company that you love their marketing, right? You want to see what their marketing is, but what you want to learn is what is the reason why this marketing works? What's the psychology behind it? What's the design element behind it? What is all of those other things that are behind it? If there's a particular product you love, you want to go, oh, okay, so I want to see what the different ideas that are behind that product. Why does that product work? What's the unique feature set? And let's say your business is in the same industry. So you want to look at your competition that way and see what is there to learn, why is it working for them, right? Not what exactly is the copy or why is it working for them, but then you need to go one step further. What happens in an industry, especially if you're in any type of industry and you're an entrepreneur, is that every industry has a perpetuating belief. A perpetuating belief is basically there's a theory of why things work and everybody talks about the same theory in a different way, right? So, for example, in coaching, like in the coaching industry, is the perpetuating belief is you need a webinar to be successful, right? So everybody says you need a webinar to really become successful, right? So everybody goes, webinar to be successful, webinar to be successful, webinar to be successful, webinar to be. So if you go to any other speaker, they will go, you need a webinar to be successful. Right, now that's a perpetuating belief, because what happens with that is you think that if your webinar is not successful, guess what? You're not going to be successful. Or the only thing that you try is a webinar, right? What happens when a perpetuating belief like this happens is that because you're talking within the circle, there is no original thought or original idea. What the way to learn is what I call a disjointed learning theory, right? Disjointed learning theory is you learn from as diverse ideas and people and strategists and businesses that you create original thought. So let me give you an example of disjointed learning theory, right? So Ford started a car company, right? He started a car company and he tried to make exactly what was happening in the business at that time, which was high-end cars, because it was new time for cars. So it was like expensive cars and a few cars, right? That company bombed. Nobody knows about that, but actually Ford started a company that completely bombed, right? Then he started another company, and that was Ford. And he came with the original idea of saying that I need to build a company that actually can serve a mass audience, right? So I still want to build a car, but it needs to serve the mass audience. And to find original ideas, he went to different industries on how he can create a car that is actually cheaper. So he knew his problem was production costs, right? And that's why the cars were expensive. So Ford went to the meat packing industry to learn about the assembly line and was able to take that concept and implement it in a completely different industry which had never heard about that concept, right? So as you learn from different ideas or different industries, different people, that creates original thought. And that original thought is what makes it unique, what makes your business unique, what makes your business work. Making a copy of another business just makes you the second best or second Robert Downey Jr. You can play his copy and you can be his, what do you call the stuntman or whatever that is, but you can't be Robert Downey Jr. You can't become successful, right? So you will become successful at being the stuntman of Robert Downey Jr. or the body double of Robert Downey Jr., but that wouldn't be a success. Your success won't be becoming Robert Downey Jr. So if you're really looking to create a successful business, you are looking to become a successful professional, as much as you want to learn from Robert Downey Jr. and go, hey, how did this guy think about acting? What does he act like? How does he show up? What is his practices? You want to see that, and then you want to go, okay, I like that idea. I don't like that idea. I love that practice, right? And then you want to go look at the second best, whoever that is for you. It is Matt Damon, or is it Ben Affleck, or whatever that is, like whoever is your favorite actor. You go to that person and you go, okay, what can I take from this guy and that guy? And then you want to go to a training school for actors and then learn there too. So as you learn from all these different ideas, our mind is so powerful, it connects the dots and says, oh, okay, that's the original thought. That's the idea that is my idea. That's the idea that's truly me. Now I can show up like that and I'm going to win. So copying doesn't make businesses successful. Being original is what makes business successful, but learning from different people who have been successful, who have already gotten further in their journey, is the most powerful thing that you can do. So learn from your competition. Sit with your competition, talk about it with your competition, but also remember that there is no way that you will get successful if you just simply copy them. It just doesn't work.
And I really like this concept because I know a lot of people, as they're just really striving to bring success to their own lives, there's like a piece that feels inauthentic when you go into a copying mode. And I've seen myself actually get into that pattern in one of my earlier ventures where I just tried to copy something that was existing, but then it didn't fuel me because there was that lack of authenticity. And so what I like about this concept is that you don't need to copy, you are your original version of you. And I know the answer to this, but I just want to reconfirm it with people. But by taking a lot of these learnings from every other competition, does it take away from my authenticity?
No, it adds to your authenticity. Because that's, again, like I said, our brains are just so beautiful and so powerful, is that what it will do, it will go, okay, I've learned from this, learned from this, learned from this, learned from this. What is it that is now, that is the truth, right? It's like, think about it, you do this program, you learn 4x4. If you don't adapt it to yourself, it's not going to work for you, right? You have to still adapt to your workplace. You have to still adapt to your business, right? So that's what your brain is going to do, because it's going to go, okay, 4x4 is just not working for me, right? Deep work is just not working for me. Okay, what does it work for you? So as much as it may feel like that I've learned from so many different peoples and that's how, is it my original thought anymore? It is, and that's why you embody it and you see what works for you, and your brain's a beautiful piece that will put it together in a way that feels congruent to you. That's a different concept, but I call that intuitive intelligence. And intuitive intelligence is basically, people think intuition is this higher power that will come to you. And yes, the higher power does come to you, and that's a different conversation for a different time, but what really fuels intuition is knowledge, right? How much do you know? What all are you learning from? How much insight are you capturing? More insights you capture, guess what? You become more intuitive. You're not able to explain why you have those ideas, but you have those ideas. Why? Because your brain just processed so much insight, it has original insight, which is your intuition in a way.
Amazing. So we've learned the 4x4 concept, and now that we've had all this extra time, you can actually start learning from a lot of your competition to start building your own identity by gathering insights from all over the industry with disjointing learning theory. And now we're going to move on to the third.
Before you go there, can I give one more thing? Just in context of competition and copying. Because if you really think about it, when you compete with someone, You have inherently put yourself in the second position. Think about it like this. When you compete with another person, your goal is only as further as that person's goal is. Right? That means A, you don't even know if this is your goal. Right? Secondly, that person is always further in the journey because you're competing against that person. There is no winning in competition anyways. So there is no reason for you to compete. The only thing that you want to do is learn, and if you want to compete, compete with yourself.
So I like the fact that you have to end with the fact that the only competition you have is the one with yourself. And you're right, you're always going to just get really close and you'll never be able to surpass because you'll be out of ideas to even surpass it if you're only taking it from copying one source. Amazing. So now for the third one, this one applies a lot more to people that are running teams or are in a management position. And it comes from the fact that a lot of people that are building business, they want to make an impact, they need to hire people. They need to have people that help them. And that's a great thing. It means you're getting more leverage, you're getting more support. And here the rule is that getting people to work for you is really easy and they're very expendable. Like you can find any, and I'm going to use a term I've heard some people mention saying, oh yeah, I can hire just monkeys to do that work, which is a very derogatory term, but at the same time just says that if there's a particular set of tasks, it's always better to just get people, know that they're going to be there for a short time, they're expendable talent, and you'll just need them to get the job done, and you can turn them over, and there's not very much value in building a solid team because there's always people available to get the task done. What would you respond to that?
So there's always more people, yes, for sure, but that the philosophy that people are expendable is completely wrong, and I'll tell you why. The philosophy, I would think, the philosophy comes from the idea of HR managers, people who have to every day deal with the energy of hiring and firing, right? So it's very hard to manage your energy when you have to tell somebody that you don't have a job anymore, which means you don't have a way to make money anymore, right? To be able to feed your kids anymore, right? So the way to distance themselves with that energy is to say, oh, what I care for is the company, and the company is the most important thing, and for the company, the people are not so important because company is all about the process, right? Or something to that tune, right? Or the product, or whatever is the story that we want to tell ourselves. So it's an easy thing or easy escape for an HR manager to kind of say people are expendable. If you look at successful entrepreneurs, and I'm going to give example of Warren Buffett here, right? Warren Buffett has had the same team, and I might be wrong on the number of years, but anywhere between 25 to 20 years, he has had the same set of employees. He's never fired, I think he's fired one person in all that time. He has the same set of employees, and that's like his home team in a way, right? And he's one of the richest men in the world who has come from absolutely nothing. Like Warren Buffett started his career as like investing a couple of $100, that type of situation, right? So he doesn't come from a big city, he doesn't come from any backing, he built from ground up and became one of the richest men in the world. And you would wonder, well, how did that happen? Why is it that he has kept the same team? And the principle is what I call the home team principle. The home team principle is basically you want to treat your team as family, but you have to let them go when it's time, right? I'll expound on that a little bit more so we can get context of why this is slightly or significantly different than people are expendable. People are expendable comes from the theory of saying, get your job done, let them go, or fire them when they're not important, right? Home team theory says, get the right people on the team who are value aligned, people aligned with what you want to do, nurture them, grow them like as if you're family, as if they're your kids, as if they're your friends, as if they're your family members, right? Nurture them, grow them, give them all the power. They already have power, give them the permission to use that power, right? Let that simmer in, let them show up as powerfully as they can every single day at their jobs. Give them empowerment, give them the training, give them the learning, treat them like family while they're there. But then when it's time, and the time will show up and it will be very clear, either they would be demotivated doing what they're doing, they would not be excited about the vision, or it would be that you would see that clearly something is off in their life right now, which is why they're not showing up the way they were showing up before. In any of those scenarios, you need to give yourself the permission to let them go. And what happens when you let them go is that they go on something that is called a hero's journey. A hero's journey is a concept that Joseph Campbell made really popular in one of his books. And the hero's journey is basically that everybody, all of us, go on a call to adventure, which means as we get sick and tired of our lives, we go on an adventure to fight the belief that has led us to where we are in the life, and there are mentors that show up, and there are life challenges that show up. We form a new belief and we come back as a new person, and then we keep going on these hero's journey all our lives, right? I'm kind of butchering it a little bit, but just to give context, right? So people need to go on their hero's journey, and sometimes they would do it within while staying with the company. Sometimes they need to step out. Now here is the concept why it's important to treat them like home team. When they're done with their hero's journey, when they are done with it, they are a better human being, and they always want to go back to their home team, right? If not always, at least sometimes want to go back to their home team, and maybe in a different capacity. Maybe they will not be your employee. Maybe they will be your business partner. Maybe they will be not your employee in the same role. It might be a different one. Maybe they will be in a different capacity. Maybe they will be in somebody else's company and reach out to you because you are so awesome, right? And be able to help you through that. Maybe they will facilitate partnerships, right? When we think about our life in context of next 3 months, we make people dispensable. When we think about our life in the context of that 30 years, we treat them like family, right? So that's what the concept of home team is really, it's not that when we say family, it's not about thinking from a perspective of saying, oh, you're family, so I will energetically not be able to let you go. That's not true. Do you not fight with your family members? Of course. You do. You sometimes even say, hey, listen, you know what? I don't believe what you believe. I'm going to step out. I'm only going to talk to you when you're ready, right? We do that. For that matter, it's easier to do it with a family member than to do it with somebody that you don't care about, right? So that's the fight that it looks like. Okay, you go now because as a family member, I know you need this adventure. It doesn't have to be a derogatory conversation. It can be an enlightening conversation when you fire someone. For that matter, there was a joke, and I don't know if you remember this joke, but I know one of our colleagues used to crack that when I just fire somebody, they don't even realize they just got fired, right? So, and that was because it doesn't have to feel like that they are getting fired. I mean, it's already hard when somebody is just losing their job, right? But you can have a conversation in a way where they actually feel good about leaving the company right after that, right? It's like, okay, it makes sense. What you are doing makes sense for the company, makes sense for me, and I can see how this will pan out great for both of us, right? And it just, again, it depends on the mindset of where you're going, but I would think all of us want to live to 100 plus at today's time, especially if you're in your 30s, 40s, even in your 50s. You easily, hopefully, can be living to 100 plus, which means you got another 50 years, 60 years, 70 years of your life. Why create enemies? Why treat them like shit? You don't want to be treated like shit. Why would you treat anybody else like that, right? So people are dispensable. Yes, it's an easy thing to say, but to treat people like that is not fair to the people that you work with. It's not fair to you or to your career, because eventually they will run into you at some point in life. And even if they don't, why do you have to do that to anybody? You can treat them like family, nurture them. They will. So here's a story. This happened with me maybe 3 or 4 times now, and I don't even have that long a career right now. So there are a lot of people that I've treated like home team that are not with me anymore. They are doing something else in the world, and they're doing beautiful, amazing things. But it is at least 3 instances that I can remember right now where the people who were working with me were actually my team, who were let go or they decided to move on. And just a year or 2 years later, they have either become partners in different companies, or they're still in communication where they help me get deal flow, or there are people who will end up becoming partners eventually because they're working at a business that will be like, okay, that's totally relevant to what we are doing today, and we might actually circle back and we're in conversations about it, right? So it only happens that they come back to you when they are getting actually further in their journey, because they know what you stand for, what's your value, what's your purpose, why are you doing what you do, and they have certain values that are associated that they have about you, and so they want to come back. They don't want to come back if you treated them like nobodies and if you treated them dispensable. They're like, okay, fine. I did the job, you paid me money for it, that's a transactional relationship, and that's all I really need from you. Great. So next time when they will talk to you, it'll be a transactional relationship that they need from you, which may or may not really be useful to you at that point. A lot of times, actually, people who ended up leaving or ended up finding a new thing or whatever, I can't even hire them again because they're so expensive at this point, because they went out of the world, did amazing things, but still, now I can still talk to them and we can become partners in things instead of trying to hire them all the time, right? So there's so many different benefits of And it's easier, honestly. You don't have to treat people like as if you're an asshole that way, right? You can just be normal, you can just be like family, you can say, this is my values, this is what I stand for, this doesn't work for me, this works for me. And the person across is also a human being. You just treat each other like human beings and you're fine.
That's amazing. So like, you know, a lot of people have that negative energy about having to manage people, but what we're saying here is if you have this home team, this people that are aligned with your values, even in the process of having them grow with you is much more beneficial. If there's an instance where they have to be let go, it's not necessarily that you're cutting them off from your life completely. They're still going to be in the same communities. They're still going to be growing in their own ways, and it's going to be even to their benefit to leave as well, because they're going to have to go through their own experience.
Exactly.
And then in your case, you're going to be able to grow the business even more. And actually, I wanted to bring this in a concept because we've talked it from the perspective of being the person that hires the people. If I am an employee and I'm looking for this type of position, should I be looking at work as looking for a home team? So what I like is we've looked at this from the employer's perspective, so people that are managing a team and hiring a team. What would you have to say for someone that wants to find employment? Should they be looking for a home team?
They absolutely should be looking for a home team. And even if you're switching jobs every time, you should be looking only for a home team. And it might sound a little bit complicated on how do I find what the home team looks like, and it's applicable also to people who are hiring for home team, right? How do you know somebody will become your home team, right? The one big principle is that you always, firstly, you need to know what's your big direction that you want to go in life, right? So it's not like you don't need to know the ultimate purpose, because purpose kind of changes a little bit, passion changes a little bit all the time in our life, like as we progress in life, right? But you want to know the direction that you want to head in, and that's the first question to ask. It's like, what's the direction I want to go, right? Is this the direction that I'm choosing for now, at least to walk towards? And if you have that already gives you some ideas on what type of companies that you want to work for. Then the second step is to really evaluate and find your values, as to what is it that you really resonate with as a human being, right? What are the values that you really resonate with as a human being? Do you care for the impact that the company creates, or do you care for the revenue that the company creates? Do you care for cars? Do you care for whatever else, right? So whatever that is that you care for, and whatever are your values, and you inherently know your values, you might have to just take a piece of paper and write it down type of thing, and there's a way to actually find your values, but you find your values and you go, okay, this is where the direction of my purpose looks like. These are the values that I really strongly hold towards me, and what are the companies that actually align with that? Who are the people that actually align with that? When you apply for a job, are the HR managers somehow representing those values, or your interviewers are representing those types of values? Are they showing up the way you would like them to show up? And if those are resonating ideas, and that's what your research on the company says, that's the company you want to work for, because most likely that company's way of operating will allow you to find a home team. It's the same for the people who are hiring, right? If you are looking for people that are in alignment and will become your home team, you want to see, of course, you want to have a big purpose to your company, and we can talk about that separately at some other time on why you need a bigger purpose than what you can conceptually. It's not a goal, it's a purpose. It's like a big mission that you need to have, because that really aligns and puts people into the home team mindset, because they're like, oh, okay, I'm in this for a lifetime. They don't have to stay in this for a lifetime, but they at least feel their purpose line, right? So that's one thing, that you need to have a big purpose, and if you don't have one, you need to evaluate that. And secondly, what are the values that your company stands for, right? What are those different principles that you really, really strongly believe as a company? What are those things that you kind of abide by, and is kind of your filter in a way to know if you're in the direction of your big purpose or you're not in the direction of your big purpose? Are you excited about this or you're not excited about this, right? So that's kind of how you really know if you're in alignment and if you can find the home team people to join your home team, or if you are joining a home team. So it's a simple exercise that you need to do if you haven't done that yet. So one of the big mistakes that we do is we become reactive. Oh, there are job openings, let's apply, right? How many can I apply for? And I'll filter through, get one. Well, you're not going to find your home team that way. If you do, coincidence, great for you, but that's not how you find a purposeful, aligned home team that will stay with you for a long time.
Amazing. And so to recap this triad, we're talking about how you shouldn't be looking at, like some people look at getting employees as very transactional. You just hire someone to get the task done. what you want to reevaluate is a new model, which is look at people like a home team. If you can build a home team, it'll increase your impact and productivity in ways that you can't even imagine, because the ripple effects of treating these people right, making sure that they're value aligned, and making sure that you're growing these people to take on more responsibility, giving them the empowerment space to keep growing and going into their own hero's journey is very important. And as an employee, you also want to be very clear on what you're looking for in a home team and try to find employment within a home team that's aligned with the direction that you want to go. Even if you're not clear on that direction, as long as it's going towards the target that you're going to, you don't need to pinpoint it, but if you can get into an employment that gets you to take that next step is much more powerful than just randomly finding any employment. One thing I'd love to link for people here that might want to go into these concepts deeper is we have a previous impact episode with Emil talking about finding your core, which has a values exercise for the individuals that can go deeper into that. And Francesca Isaeli talks about being bold in your vision, which can also help people that have a business that haven't figured out this vision yet. So have I missed anything on this triad?
No, this is perfect. Yeah.
So that was another very powerful one, and I wanted to bring in a fourth one, and this one I very selfishly bring up, and the reason I say that is because when I first started, I was one of these people, like I consider myself a go-getter, like I just want to get things done, and I sometimes will get into a space where I'm very scattered in my mind. Like I'll have a to-do list that is like endless, and my prioritization method is just like, okay, just put everything in a list and just start scratching them out, and everything needs to be done yesterday. And this Brule, you ran an intervention on me. This was back in December 2013, is I had this giant, I just took on the Department of Entrepreneurship at Mindvalley, and I had this giant to-do list. I wanted to create a ton of things, and it felt impossible to get anything done because everything needed to be done yesterday. Yeah. That's the Brule. How did you intervene?
I remember standing and really going through each of the items and then really having that conversation. I think the conversation led us to get into the idea of the forts in the night and the idea of having a long-term plan, right? So again, that was 5 years ago or something, almost 5 years ago, and I've expounded on that a little bit more, right? So for example, what happens is if you set out a vision or a direction or a goal for yourself in the coming couple of months or a couple of weeks or every day, right? What happens for you is you become really anxious, really scared, really fearful, really like you feel like you need to work all the time, and that doesn't bring out the best quality of work. For that matter, most of the time, the kind of work that you end up doing is so immediate that it's usually not useful for the future, right? So it's only the work that gets done now. It's not useful at all again, right? Great businesses, great professionals never want to do work that's useful only once, right? Or try to do as minimal of work that is useful only once. You want to find things that work for a really long time. So best type of goal, even for a company, is not to set what's the revenue goal for next year, but what's the revenue goal for the next 20 years. Where we'll be at 20 years from now, or 10 years from now at least, right? And the reason why you want to set a 20 or a 10-year goal or a vision for 20 or a 10-year goal is because it puts you in a place of non-anxiety, first of all, because you're not thinking what happens today. You're thinking about what will happen 10 years from now, right? It gives you an aspiring vision because now you're looking at something that's absolutely brilliant because it has the space of 10 years to manifest itself, right? Or to create itself, right? It doesn't have 2 days or 2 hours to get it done, right? So that means you can dream a lot bigger. You can show up with a lot bigger vision. You can ask yourself a much bigger question, and hopefully that will put you in a place of saying, what I do today must be useful 10 years from now, right? Which makes you highly productive with just the quality of tasks that you put on your list, right? What we did then, based on the Knights and Forts theory and the year-long plan, is first let's do the year-long plan. I think what we discussed, and again, factually, I might not be 100% accurate on the story, but basically the idea was that instead of making a plan for next week, what if we actually scheduled everything for the next year, right? What if we actually put down what's going to happen in the coming 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, right? And we actually assign it to a month, right? For example, let's say you have an idea, a brilliant marketing idea that you want to execute this year or this month for your company. Is it really relevant to happen this month, or is it relevant to happen this year, right? Because you might have 10 brilliant marketing ideas, but not 10 of them can be executed in this month. Also, it's not actually useful to execute all 10 of them in this month, right? Every business has an age, every profession has an age, which means things are better done at a particular time, right? If you do them too early, they don't work. If you do them too late, they don't work, right? It's the time that is required for that business to age itself in a particular way for you to actually fully enjoy that quality work at that time, right? Now, when you put yourself through a 1-year calendar, what happens is, let's say you have 10 marketing ideas. Now you have all the time to execute all 10 of them if you need to really execute all the ideas over the next year. A lot of times what happens is when you're making a year-long calendar, you realize that A, you don't need those 10 ideas. That usually is the first thing that happens. You go, okay, what's the goal that I want to get to this year? All right, let's say I want to double my business this year. Fine, okay, you want to double your business. How many things do you need to double your business? Most likely what you would come up with as a list, you can eliminate half of it and you'll still double your business. Right? And that's the realization. Like, do this exercise right now as a professional as well. You want to double your unit, go ahead, write all the ideas you have. You want to double your unit, you will find there are 3 ideas, and that's all you need to do that will double your unit this year. For that matter, each of those ideas have the capability of doubling your unit this year, which means you have 3 ideas that can double your unit. Even if one of them works, you will double your unit. Right? So you don't need the 10 ideas. So first thing that happens when you make a year-long plan is you eliminate half of it. Right. Secondly, it takes away the anxiety and fear and like the whole, oh shit, I need to do it right now type of situation for you. And that allows you to really phase yourself and really put the ideas down. But then what you need to ask is a further question. What happens is new ideas are so attractive. They're so beautiful. They're like, oh, a new idea. Because we're creative souls, right? We like to create. Everybody likes to create, right? So we're creative souls. You're like, oh, new idea. Let's do the new idea, right? Or a lot of us are that type of people, is we go the new idea first. And what we do in that process is we forget what's actually working already, right? And that's where the theory of forts and knights comes in, right? What you want to do is there's always a fort in your business. There's always a fort in your profession. These are things that already work. Okay? These are things that naturally you've figured out now, and these are working things. What you need is you want to protect your fort, which means you want to first schedule the activity for what's inside the fort. So 80% of your time is dedicated to maintaining and growing the fort. Like, these are ideas that are actually within the scope of what's already working. And then there's the 20% that is the creative new knights idea. These are the people, like, in the old times, the forts is protected and there's the army for the fort, and the knights are to go out and conquer new territory, right? So the knights idea is where you go out and go, okay, these are 20% of the ideas that I want to go out in the world and figure out what is the next creative thing that will bring the growth for my company, will bring the growth for my division. And you want to make sure that 80% of your time is protecting and growing the fort, because if you lose the fort, there's no point of the knights. Knights have no place to go back and eat dinner, right? So if they lose a fight, there's no place to go back for them to actually go back and go, okay, I'm now home again, and I can replenish and I can go back again to actually find new ideas or new territory, right? So you want to protect your fort, and you want to let your knights go to find those creative ideas. So there's a two-part thing to it. First is to have a longer plan, so anyways, your knights are not anxious that they need to win yesterday, right? So your knights are like, oh, okay, there are some creative ideas, that's great, but I have a whole year to conquer new territory, right? So your knights are chilled. And then at the second point of time, you're also giving space for your fort to actually expand and continue to thrive as it is. And as a king, you are making sure that your tribe and your city is thriving, and it's not just only focused on what's the next win that we can get, draining the core out. You don't want that. So that's kind of the whole concept of really being able to work through your creative ideas. Now, I want to give a short little system if you have too many ideas, right? If you have too many ideas and you're like, I can't really know which idea. So for example, I said you have 10 ideas and there are 3 ideas that can double your business, but let's say you're not able to identify them. So there's an additional system that I have, which is called LERR. I'm going to explain that in a separate video, the additional video that is associated with this training, that will help you go through those. Oh my God, I have these 10 ideas and I feel I need to do all 10 of them. It will help you prioritize and go, okay, which are the 3 that I really need to do for me to get the maximum return on the time invested and not have the anxiety of getting all 10 of them done today.
Amazing. It's so funny you comment on the shiny new idea syndrome, which I am a victim of, especially when I first joined at Mindvalley. And what happened is when I started applying this methodology with the knights and the fortresses, and actually scheduling it over a year's time, that's the first thing that happened. The anxiety level just dropped. And then what happened is I was able to actually see when was I going to spend the time on each of these ideas, even if it was 3 months down the road. I didn't have the urgency of like, oh my God, I need to do this now, especially since I also was breaking another one of your models saying, oh, I've seen someone do it, I need to copy it now or I'll be too late. And then you realize that, you know, this whole scarcity and like time constraint was all a mental model I had in my head. Once I had it all laid out in a year, then I was able to say, okay, I need to do this. I had this new focus, and then actually things got done as opposed to just get lost in my own thoughts.
And that, to add to that, clarity is the greatest way to create intensity in your business. People think it's about doing more. It has nothing to do more. It's about doing less. It's about being clear about what you need to do is what creates tremendous amount of intensity in your business. By intensity, I mean intensity of speed of actually outcome, output from your business, and as a person too.
Amazing. And so, as I've mentioned at the beginning of this training, we've covered a lot of applicable things that you can use as an employee or as an entrepreneur to really increase the impact you have without needing to work to death and realize that most of the successful people don't work harder, they obviously work smarter, and you now have some tools on how to apply this yourself. And so I want to do a recap for everybody watching here is that, I don't know if you've noticed already, but all of these ideas tie in together. Number one, we want to look at how do you work smarter. There's a 4x4 framework. You prioritize the tasks that need to be done through 4 days for 4 hours a day in focus time, where you're going to use Parkinson's law, which is going to make it so that each of these tasks gets completed because the allotted time you gave it is shorter, and the quality of the work goes up because you are in deep work mode. You are extremely focused on that one task, and you know that is the priority that needs to get done. Now with this extra time that you have, you can actually use that time to look for new ideas. You're not going to copy the competition, you're going to get inspired by their new ideas. And we're going to have a separate training on dissociated learning models so that you can see where should you be looking for inspiration to bring these new ideas forward. Number three is we talked about how is it that you can build a home team, because as you start growing and making more impact, if you're an employer, you're going to realize that you're going to want to bring more people on the team so that you can amplify this impact, and finding the right people and knowing that they're going to grow with you, they're going to go on their own journey, they're going to have their own values, and you're going to be able to see them take on more responsibility will maximize the impact you have. And if you are an employee, you're going to want to get into a team that has this home team concept, because it's going to be able to respect the things that you've learned, which is understanding that you're going to be able to prioritize your tasks in a 4x4 framework, knowing that you're going to be someone that brings new ideas to the company by looking at dissociated learning models. And finally, we talked about how do you prioritize, and it's looking at a more long-term model. You don't need to start stressing about all these crazy ideas you need to implement right now. If you use the Fortress and the Knights model, where you look at what are the core activities you need to do within a year's framework, as well as looking at what are the nice, shiny new ideas that you can test, but the business doesn't depend on, you can see that as a scheduled plan, you know what are the core ideas that need to be executed and what are the new innovations you can bring in a scheduled fashion so that you don't have a sense of overwhelm. And then finally, Ajit's going to go through a separate system called the LERR model, which is going to allow you to even better filter all of these ideas into which ones make the most impact for your business and should be scheduled into your annual plan. This was a huge training. Thank you so much, Ajit, for your time. And for everybody watching, we've just synthesized here, there's a lot of these ideas that you'll want to put into practice. And I'd love to give you the opportunity to give some closing thoughts for the audience.
I think one of the key things that at least that we talk about in the book Live Big, and we also talk about otherwise as we're training more entrepreneurs and also professionals, is one of the key areas that you want to focus on as an entrepreneur, as a professional. And you're at Impact Work, so you're already focusing on it to some degree, but I would like to reinstate that is the two key elements that I've found creates tremendous amount of intensity and growth for an individual. One is getting extremely clear about what it is that you want, right? And it's not only in context of work, in context of life. And the clearer you get, the better it is, easier it is, and more flow comes to your life because it's just so clear, right, as where you're going. It's like almost knowing if you want to go to the town, having a clear map where how to get to the town gets you the fastest to the town, right? And secondly, having the tools and strategies and making sure that you're learning to be able to create the momentum towards that clarity or clear direction that you put yourself, which you're doing here at Impact at Work, and I'm grateful that we get to interact today. But keep at it. Keep at it. People tend to have a life plan in a way, but they don't tend to have a learning plan. And that's one of the big flaws. You've got to have a learning plan, and here Impact at Work is automatically created for you, which is amazing and awesome for you. But other than that, also take the time to actually have a learning plan, actually have a model of learning better, faster, greater, and more often, so you can fuel your clear output that you want with the fuel that it needs in that car to get from one point, or electricity that it needs from going from one point to another point, right? So that's what is very, very important. I would love to leave you with that thought, to really let it simmer in and see if you've got that clarity in life. If not, can you get more clarity in life? And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be as clear as it can get. And then, do you have a learning plan to support that clarity? And I think you are going to be great. And let us know how you feel about that later in the comments.
In the Facebook group.
In the Facebook group, yeah.
And so I just want to thank everybody for taking the time watching this episode. I hope you got all the insights you were looking for. Ajit, thank you for your time. Your new book, is there a way that people can get a copy of it?
Yes, you can pre-order now. The book actually comes out on December 11th, and but you can pre-order. Just go to Amazon, type Live Big. If it doesn't come up, type Live Big, Ajit Nawalkar, which is a very easy to spell thing. Or you can copy it from this page, and you can just put it in there, and the book should come up. And I would love to hear your comments, by the way. So let us know. Tag me in the Facebook group. I'm there. So just tag me and let me know how you feel about this training, what you learned, what you think I can do better in context of developing these systems. If you feel some system you have an idea for, share that there too. I'm always learning like you are, and always developing these methods to become better and better for everybody to execute even more and be more productive and be more happy and be more fulfilled in their life. So tag me on it. I'm there. So we'll have a conversation there. So that would be awesome if you do that.
All right, thank you so much, Ajit. Now go ahead in the systems section and start learning from your disjointed learning model, as well as applying this LERR method. We'll see you next training. Thank you.